Next, I'd like to invite up to the podium Neil Meropol, who is the Vice President of Research Oncology at Flatiron Health. Dr. Meropol is also the chair of the NCI Director's Clinical Trial and Translational Research Advisory Committee, which we thank you for your service on that.
Thanks, Mia, and thanks for the conference organizers for inviting me today and for putting me in at this moment in time in the program, because I feel like all the presentations up to this point have led to this moment in a way, but not to oversell it. So I'm coming to you as an oncologist who works in a tech company, a software company, Flatiron Health. One of our major foci is leveraging the electronic health record as a platform for generating evidence, for generating integrated evidence. And so in many ways, integrated evidence related to diagnostics is something I think about and my colleagues think about all the time. So without further ado, just to kick it off, we've heard a lot about what we can do, and we've heard a lot about vision for integrated diagnostics. But I thought it would be worth starting out by just acknowledging that there are some significant hurdles in our way to getting from here to there. First of all, diagnostic modalities often lack the kind of investment that new drugs get. In terms of the evidence that exists at the time they become available for broad consumption. There are a lot of reasons for this that maybe we can get into a little bit in the panel. Technology's really far advanced. Diagnostics are getting more and more complicated. There's a lot of new tools out there for us to take advantage of. And given those two things, we're in this situation where there's incomplete evidence, there's lots of options, and clinicians face this conundrum where they don't know exactly what tests to order, and they don't know necessarily how to interpret the results of those tests. So, how do we overcome this? So, I think Kojo, you might have laid out early on a slide that looked like this, which basically acknowledged that diagnostics are not just tell me what disease I have. Diagnostics affect every single component of medical care, and there are decisions associated with each of them, starting with screening, making a diagnosis, selecting therapy, how best to follow up patients after they've completed therapy. And then another component for the clinician is understanding test performance. What is the sensitivity and specificity, the positive or negative predictive value of a diagnostic test, for example? What is the cost to my patient based on their insurance? And should I be concerned about the cost to society as a whole? How inconvenient is the test that I'm asking my patients to undergo? And insofar as we've talked a lot about where AI is going, machine learning, we got to be able to interpret not only the test, but also the results that are generated and fed to us in terms of understanding what it means and how to act on it. So getting to the electronic health record, we're in this great point in time where we've moved from the beginning of my career on the left to where we are today. Everything is digitized. This is just a huge opportunity. But we all know, and I've probably shown this slide at 3 other National Academies meetings, EHRs were not built for research. But they're a great source of longitudinal data. They do integrate multiple data sources, not everything, but a lot flows through the EHR. You get real-time information, it's digitized, it's part of the workflow of clinicians. So it opens the door to providing decision support, and it's much more representative than a typical clinical trial, which we know tend to enroll younger, healthier, whiter, richer patients than the typical cancer patient nationwide or worldwide. Feeding into this opportunity that we have today is the fact that the FDA over the past several years, has put out tons of guidance that address issues around data quality, analytic approaches, fitness for purpose when using real-world data, the types of data that you get from an electronic health record or other real-world data sources, applying those into the gold standard being regulatory decision-making. But really what we're talking about is, regulatory decision-making is clinical decision-making, which is affecting patients, which is the highest stakes scenario of any decision-making that exists probably in the world today. So getting back to the EHR. So the EHR is the sun, everything else, revolves around it. I know that's hard for many people to accept, but it's true. As I mentioned before, a lot flows through the EHR, but there's also this need for being able to integrate sources of data that are generated outside the EHR. I've listed those here. We've talked a lot about pathology and radiology. We just heard from Brad about wearables, but there's insurance claims. There's social determinants of health we heard about earlier, and patient-reported data and mortality. The EHR is notoriously poor at having accurate death data. It's often missing. But we heard earlier today about the ability to link with population registries that have accurate mortality data. When we think about using the EHR for integrating evidence, there are certain table stakes capabilities and things to keep in mind that I just like to call out. Of course, patients are at the center of all of this, and so respect for privacy, understanding what is appropriate use of patient data for good. And I think everybody working with patient data recognizes that. The ability to link with other sources, that often involves tokenization. There's now methodologies, in production at scale that allow the routine linkage of various data sources. You got to be able to curate both structured and unstructured data. I'll come back to that a little bit. ML, natural language processing, you got to be really careful in its application so we don't end up with recommendations and conclusions that are misleading or frankly incorrect or biased. You got to be able to have access to the data in real time. That's something that's special about EHR-based data. And then you have to realize that the use case, the particular context matters. Every data point in the EHR is not fit for purpose to answer every research question as you generate evidence. I told Charles Sawyers earlier that I was going to steal his comment about use cases. Everything requires a use case to start, to demonstrate the accuracy, the reliability of recommendations, of conclusions drawn from integrating evidence, and only then will adoption be able to flow. A couple of points about types of data. We routinely collect data in clinical practice and document it in the EHR. These data are a wealth of information. You're all familiar with lots of publications, some regulatory decisions that have included routinely collected EHR-based data. But it's not fit for all purposes because of missingness, patient selection, biases of different kinds, how you measure outcomes or the inability to measure certain outcomes, and the variability in exposure that, there are unmeasured reasons why one patient gets one thing and another patient gets another thing. So sometimes you need intentionally collected data, which can be layered on top of observational research study in a prospective way when you have a specific reason for needing CAT scans every 8 weeks or needing circulating tumor DNA drawn at particular time points. Or you need to know the performance status at every visit, things that are often missing or not part of routine care at all. So as an example, this is a study that we participated in at Flatiron Health in collaboration with Roche as well as Foundation Medicine. And we call it the Prospective Clinical Genomics Study, which in essence was a prospective observational study in patients with non-small cell lung cancer to generate an annotated biobank where circulating tumor DNA, not part of routine care, was obtained at pre-specified time points to generate a data set of integrated evidence that included genomic data, clinical data, digital pathology being available on these patients to generate insights. And we enrolled about 1,000 patients over 18 months, very rapid. We ascertained patients electronically, so about 25% of patients that were surfaced actually enrolled. And so from the standpoint of the conduct of the study, a success. And there have been a series of publications and presentations leveraging this data set for insights. On the left, comparing tissue-based genomic profiling to blood-based genomic profiling, when might one be preferred over another? And on the right, a correlation of trajectory of circulating tumor DNA and its association with response to therapy. So these are the sorts of things that you can do in an observational study with a little bit of intentional data collection, integrating evidence. So, I made it sound relatively simple, but there's a complexity to the operations involved in pulling something like this off in terms of the platform itself. And so just to dive a little deeper, we like to think of three types of data in the EHR. One is routinely collected structured data like vital signs and laboratory tests, drug administrations. The second time would be intentionally collected data in the EHR that might not be part of routine care, like structured adverse event collection according to common toxicity criteria, like RECIST measurements, things that are part of clinical trials but not part of routine care. And we've built forms and embedded them in the EHR to allow these to be collected as part of the routine workflow. We call this structured data that are intentionally collected. And then finally, there's unstructured data in pathology reports and physician notes and so forth. So we've got tools that flow these data directly from the EHR into data collection warehouses or EDCs. The unstructured data needs to undergo processing, which often involves humans along with machine learning algorithms, along with machines. Linkage then with external sources of evidence, of data, and then applying the appropriate analytics to get to evidence. So along the lines of what we heard in the previous talk from Brad, this enables the concept of a platform that is always turned on in a way, where sites are tech-enabled to collect data on demand, to answer particular questions, to process those data at scale, and to layer on intentional data collection when there's a specific research question of interest that requires data that is not only routinely collected, but needs to be collected specifically for the purpose of research. So these tools exist today. And this is what I want to leave you all with, and opening the door for a discussion about why aren't they in widespread use? Why haven't we solved this problem of integrating diagnostic evidence at this point? ML is being used routinely for selecting cohorts for research, for patient ascertainment for clinical trials. We have methods for structured and unstructured data processing. Data collection tools are already can be embedded in the EHR and are. We can automate the transfer of data directly from the EHR to an EDC, so cut out the clinical research associate who is transcribing data from one place to another. We're still in the 1980s in certain ways, in many settings. And finally, tokenization and linkage of EHR-based data with external sources. The time is here. So the tools exist. Let's do it. Thanks.